Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today on our webinar, Managed Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. My name is Jack Flynn, and I'll be your host for today. I have two speakers with me. First, we have Jonathan Trayers, Director of Cybersecurity here at Echo, and Paul Hogan, Director of Managed Detection and Response. So, taking a quick look at the agenda for today. What we have firstly is, I suppose, three main topics. We'll look at the three key challenges we are seeing in endpoint security based on the current threat landscape and how it's developed over time. Next, we'll look at the key features that we see that businesses should look for in a robust and high quality managed EDR program. And then finally, we'll look at the Echo Security team and how they provide our own managed EDR solution using Microsoft Defender. We'll round it off then with some key takeaways from the discussion, which we hope will aid in the selection and improvement of your own endpoint security program. What I'd like to do as well is just remind everyone that we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So this is your opportunity to address any kind of endpoint security concerns that you might have that are relevant to your specific business. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A box on your screen and we'll address as many as we can at the end. So before I hand it over to our first speaker, we'd just like to run a quick poll to see where everyone is in their security journey when it comes to endpoints. So let me just get that up now. Okay, so everyone should have it there on their screen. So if you wouldn't mind, it'd be great to see where everyone stands right now. So yeah, what endpoint security solution does your current company have? So endpoint protection solution, extended detection and response, EDR with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, a managed EDR solution, or what is the difference? Brilliant. Okay, so we've quite a few answered there. That's great. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll show the results of the poll now at the end of the session. Okay, well then look, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to our first speaker, Jonathan Trayers.
Hi everyone. Thanks for joining today. Looking forward to going through some of the challenges that you might be facing in terms of your endpoints. I'm a director of cybersecurity here at Echo. And I've over a decade helping different organizations to increase their security posture. So look, I wanted to start off by having a quick rugby clip considering the week we have in it. It's a clip from Ireland versus Romania on the 9th of September. And in it, we have Ireland, who's number 1 in the world, and Romania, who's number 20 in the world. And I think the key feature of this clip is the fact that Ireland has one of the best defenses in the world, yet after just 2 minutes, Romania scored. The key takeaway here out of that is that 100% protection is not always achievable. Attackers will find a way through, right? And it's essential, right? And specifically when we talk to today, to ensure that you're able to not just have protection in place, but have the ability to respond and recover, just exactly how Ireland did a couple of weeks ago, where they recovered and scored 82 points. Transitioning then into that, we've broken it down to 3 kind of topics that I'll discuss today. I'm going to talk it from a business level, and then I'll put you on to Paul, who'll kind of jump into the technical level after. So we're going to talk around firstly, how the changing threat landscape can affect endpoint protection that you need, what has happened over the last couple of years that makes that change, and as an organization, do you understand the risks and what has changed in terms of your exposure? What do you need to think about? I'll then move forward and kind of do a deep dive into the legacy approaches, talk around a little about what's in place previously. Endpoint protection is what we always had before, and it's moved now towards to essential that you have an EDR solution and vulnerability management. And I'll explain what the differences are and what you need to consider as your organization. And then finally, we talk around the monitoring and the response. So protection isn't enough. You need to detect and respond. So I'll go through a little bit around why that is, and if you, as your organization, what you should do. But one thing, as we go through the next couple of slides, I'd like you to consider for your company is, what are the major risks and vulnerabilities you see? And as we talk through this, are you configured to protect against these threats? If there's compliance for your organization, do you have the necessary pieces in place? What security incidents are happening right now? Do you know? Is there someone looking at the tools? And what has the impact of such a threat on your organization? So just keep them in mind. I'll try to answer some of them questions as we move forward. So that kind of moves nicely into the threat landscape, right? When I was preparing, I picked up Google and I searched latest cyber threats and incidents. And here is literally the screenshot of what I picked up yesterday. So we have 3 different ones, all specifically ransomware, but on the left-hand side, it actually linked very closely to what we see as the biggest changes in that area, right? So firstly, why are these threats happening, right? The shift to remote working has definitely been a key piece. Beforehand, everyone had a brick wall up around their organization, network security in place, and now everyone has a laptop at home working off their home Wi-Fi or potentially sometimes insecure Wi-Fi. So therefore, the exposure level has increased, and as an organization, you have to adapt towards that. Secondly, then the majority of breaches are due to existing vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. And if you look to the right-hand side here, actually down at the one around the Sri Lankan government, they were able to get into their government's cloud systems, potentially in that area looking into it. It seems to be due to misconfiguration. So it's so important that organizations are able to adapt. On top of that, ransomware attacks and threat actors are continuing to grow, and the breaches are costing and having a significant impact on the organization, right? And also regulations are increasing. So look here to the right-hand side again, and we have MGM, which is just this week, and they're saying it's going to top 100 million to recover their business from that attack. And similarly, we can see that happen to the HSE, right? So it's the cleanup costs are huge, so it's essential to get ahead of that. And finally, and to this point, cyber and security are setting the bar higher. And if you don't have the necessary controls in place and you haven't done your due diligence, they're now considering not paying out. So we can jump in a little bit more here. I'm just going to speak to the stats on the right side, because when I was doing some research in around the Microsoft Digital Defense Report this October, these 3 stats were very clear in terms of what's happening. So 80% of successful compromises originate through managed devices, unmanaged devices. So therefore, again, focusing on the importance of endpoint security. Human operated ransomware attacks are up more than 200%. For me, that's a huge stat. It kind of shows today when we're talking around endpoint protection versus EDR, will explain why human operated, we need to move that shift across from endpoint protection to EDR. And then on top of that, 70% of organizations encountered human operated ransomware had fewer than 500 employees. I think that was a very interesting stat for myself, due to the fact previously we would think nation states or large actors would target enterprises because they'd have a bigger impact. But in this case, it's actually smaller businesses and medium businesses that are getting impacted by ransomware, which has detrimental business operations issues. So we'll jump then to the next point, which is around legacy approaches. But before I go into some elements around it, I wanted to talk around what's the difference between endpoint protection and EDR. And I know many of this group here will know this already, but it's important just to cover it off. So endpoint protection primarily focuses on if a file is downloaded to a computer, it searches against a known set of signatures or profiles of a database and says, oh, we've seen this before, and it blocks it from executing on the machine. And that works in many cases, but EDR is different, right? So it continuously monitors your PC. So it would be looking at different actions that are taken on the endpoint. It looks at, for example, someone was to be searching the identities, who am I, what access the person on the PC has. These tactics, techniques, and procedures would indicate something that shouldn't really be happening by a day-to-day user, and would send an alert that there's potentially someone there. And that's really important in terms of the stats around human operated ransomware, because human operated ransomware would only be picked up with the EDR piece. And that kind of links to the legacy approaches, and some more stats we have is that 46% of systems are compromised had no malware on them. So therefore, in that scenario, endpoint protection potentially would not have detected or prevented an attacker from having an impact. So therefore, the days of just having an antivirus where it's downloaded, it blocks to say this file can't be there, are dead. You do need to supplement with other solutions and technologies. And the other technologies in that case are EDR, which I've just covered, and vulnerability management. So attackers don't just look at don't just use their skills to get in. They typically look for the low-hanging fruit. So vulnerabilities or misconfigurations in software that software or your desktop. So you need to be able to ensure that your latest Windows patches, not just Patch Tuesday, but also application patches and firmware patches are in place. And a vulnerability management system will be able to help there on that. And then look, the third point was around people, right? So protection isn't enough, and you need to be able to detect and respond. We know that 100% protection is impossible. So therefore, if an incident happens, no matter what time of the day it is, you need to have the necessary skills and expertise to be able to respond to it, including the access to instant response capability, that in the event something happens, that you can call upon specialists to help prevent the incident from having a large impact. And for most organizations, this 24/7 coverage is really difficult to achieve internally because it has a significant cost. And also, so it has a significant cost. So what I'm trying to show here on the right-hand side is just a small timeline of an attacker entering an organization. So from trying to get a password to looking at getting credentials, and from that then there's been several alerts that are detected, and they're going to be put forward and sent to your solution. In this case, it will be an EDR solution that would pick up this. I think this screenshot is from Microsoft Defender, and it indicates that, you know, people have access from different regions, and someone has to stitch all this together and be able to understand what is happening. And normally this happens on a Friday evening, so having this 9 to 5 coverage in your organization is quite difficult to achieve. So moving forward then, and just as I wrap up my section before I put on to Paul, I kind of wanted to loop back and answer the questions around what are the key features of a managed EDR and VM program? What does someone need to have, and what does good look like? So first thing is endpoint detection and response. In that case, we've talked around it already. It's to be able to detect if someone is on your device, someone clicking a button, to be able to take actions so that it'll be able to detect inappropriate or abnormal activity. Two, around the next generation protection. In this scenario, next generation protection is very similar to endpoint protection. So there's still a place for that. But what that also does, it looks at files, and it changes over time. So these new EDR solutions EDR solutions will be able to do more than your endpoint protection solutions. On top of that, the third point is around attack surface reduction. In that scenario, your software should be able to see what's happening and take necessary actions, either by itself if you programmed it to, or also by a team. So be able to isolate, to lock it down, to ensure that if something happens on that, an attacker is on it, they can't move laterally into your organization. The next point is around auto investigation and remediation. And essentially, that solution should be able to stitch different alerts together to provide you with a simplified view of what you need to investigate. This is more focused towards your security person who's monitoring this so that they're able to see trends and understand what's happening. On top of that, if you have a program in place, TVM is there, and that's essentially to make sure that your endpoints have the right configuration, your software is configured correctly, and they don't have any potential vulnerabilities on them that will make it easier for attacker to move through your network. On top of that, then the next one is threat hunting. This is more of a capability. So in a scenario where there's a zero-day attack, someone from a security team can search the network with some very new incidents of compromise or identifiers of compromise, and be able to search to see, are you exposed right now before patches have been deployed by your vendor? On all of this, specifically around the security incidents, should be available 24/7, 365. So I hope that covers off the key points here. Next, I'm going to hand you over to Paul, and look, we'll be here for more questions to go through some of this later on. Paul, do you want me to stop sharing the screen?
Yeah, stop sharing. I have it there now, Johnny. Yeah, so good morning, everyone, and thanks, Johnny, for that great introduction. I think it really sets the scene as to what's important nowadays. What I'm going to cover now is our Echo's new solution. It's a managed detect and response solution based on Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. And I thought what I might do first of all is just why Microsoft. There's a couple of reasons why Microsoft. There are lots of endpoint solutions out there: endpoint protection, endpoint detect and respond, vulnerability management solutions, configuration management solutions. But why we've chosen Microsoft and why we're using Microsoft in this instance is a number of reasons. So firstly, and a lot of people don't realize it, but as an endpoint protection solution and detect and response solution, Microsoft scores very highly and rates very highly with analysts. So it'll be top right Gartner Magic Quadrant. It will be seen as a leader in the security wave. If you look at some of the industry awards, etc., it continues to win awards across the spectrum. The one that I kind of like and take a lot of notice with is, if you just see there on the kind of middle bottom, is MITRE ATT&CK. So MITRE ATT&CK is a framework for classifying, evaluating attacks across a attack kill chain. And what they do periodically is they'll do testing against a particular threat actor, and they look at all the tactics and techniques that Johnny would have alluded to earlier on, and I'll say, right, how now do these endpoint protection, endpoint detect and respond solutions react to that? And if you go to that site and have a look, you'll see how it's scored very highly, and that just, to me, proves the efficacy of the solution, which is really key. And I will touch on that a little bit later on. So I'll just go through very briefly an example of what that looks like. And the second reason is, and one thing that we've noticed, mainly through, I suppose, security evaluations we have done with clients, consulting engagements, is that a lot of clients would tend to have Microsoft Defender for Endpoint as an endpoint solution, and it's either not configured properly, they're not using the full set of services of it. They have that as well as another endpoint protection solution, and it's just sitting there dormant. Or they have it, but they're not getting the maximum use out of it because they don't have the right set of people to be able to operate it, monitor it, manage it on a 24/7 basis, and take appropriate action when needed. And that's what's led into our service. So, what's it start with? Well, it starts with the endpoint. I suppose the key point, and sometimes people don't realize that, is the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint solution deals not just with Microsoft technologies, but also Linux, Mac OS. And then when you look at mobile and tablet devices, the whole range of iOS and Android devices too. okay, the actual functionality might differ slightly across the various platforms, but a key point is that the MDE solution does cover all of those. So if we start with that, that's what your environment is or looks like. It's going to have some, all, or many of those devices or device types. What we do is we layer on top of that is Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Now there are various plans and various configurations, but I just take all the kind of plans and configurations as one here. We can go through that later if needs be. So what's Defender for Endpoint? Well, it's an endpoint security platform, an enterprise platform to prevent, detect, investigate, and respond to advanced threats. So once you see that word prevent there, you think endpoint protection solutions, and then when you see detect and respond, you take endpoint detect and respond solutions as well. And then there's one key piece in the middle there, that vulnerability management. Vulnerability management is key. Why? If we look at it and we see what is wrong, or why, or how have devices been exploited, or how have organizations been attacked, generally it's gone down to two things in the endpoint. One is the endpoint hasn't been configured properly, and secondly, the endpoint hasn't been patched properly. If configuration management and your security configuration management is done properly and vulnerability management done properly, that attack surface area gets greatly reduced. So that's the product. Again, some people I know on the quick poll, I think it's about 65% of the audience would have this solution in place like this. Maybe not all the features in that license would have that in place. Now, the last component of what we're bringing to the table is our 24/7 SOC, which gives that 24/7 detect and respond. So it's monitoring the environment, it's looking at the signals, it's looking at the outputs from the various kind of components, and then it's making a determination. Either automatically we'll make changes to respond, or manually we'll investigate, or we'll do some threat hunting to understand what's happening and what are the remediation actions that need to be carried on. So in a nutshell, that's what the service is. There's endpoints, there's a product, and then there's a service offering that sits on top of it. So just delving into each of these in a little bit more details, so people understand where it is. The first area here is a thing called attack surface reduction. In previous versions of Endpoint, these were called various different things, but right now that's called attack surface reduction. And really what you can think of that is, that's kind of like your first line of defense. And that's kind of like that configuration management. It's kind of a set of controls that make sure that the endpoint is set up to be able to block and not even allow the execution of common malware or exploit techniques. So for example, you might have a rule in there where it say, I have an Office application that tries to spawn a child process. Well, that doesn't look right. Block that. I have Adobe Acrobat that wants to, spawn a child process. That doesn't look right. Why is that happening? Block that as well. I might have a rule that I have an email client that goes to do something similar. So you can see at a very, very early stage, this is your first line of detection and protection, stopping malware even before it begins to start. And as an example, in the Defender portal, you'll get to see something like this. So here you'll see attack surface reduction rules. It's just kind of a report some of the detections that are seen. In this mode, it's in block mode. There's various modes it can be deployed in. We won't go into too much detail here. But you see, there's a legitimate process here. People might understand this as being a legitimate process. That's a legitimate process. But whatever happened in this instance, it didn't run legitimately. Therefore, was blocked. So you can see the value of that attack surface reduction rule straight away. The second component, Johnny alluded very well to this around endpoint protection, is next generation protection. And pretty much any endpoint vendor today will talk about next generation protection. And really what we're talking about is moving away from just static signatures and that way of detecting malware, and looking at things like dynamic heuristics, looking at how the software is working, what it's trying to do, the piece of malware, what it's trying to do. So that's a kind of really key point. Johnny did mention polymorphic viruses that'll change slightly. So your real-time protection using next generation protection will protect against those, and that's a feature that's built in. One key point on it, we hear a lot about fileless malware. So malware that would execute in memory. Again, we're looking at the behavior. It's something that's generally detected by machine learning. So any next generation protection solution must have that in place. And so what we're looking at here still is protection at a very, very early stage. The other point I just mentioned, you would have seen on the kind of previous screen, more on the ASR rule, is sometimes you'll have trusted and untrusted applications. So you might have a trusted application that's doing something malicious, like that Office application. So that the key that the Defender for Endpoint will allow you to do is in its configuration to allow that to operate as well. So this is a kind of the setup of it in terms of what you might see in your desktop. Pretty much everyone will have this in their desktop right now. Maybe in terms of virus and threat protection, it might be turned off, and you might see another antivirus product in there. But if you're using the full Microsoft stack, it looks something like that. What I did want to do is show this one. So this is kind of key to understanding the difference between endpoint protection, or next generation protection, and endpoint detect and respond. So effectively, what we're looking at. Next generation protection is about pre-execution. So before a piece of malware gets to try and do something, or a script tries to run something, it's that pre-execution blocking. That's typically what you would have seen in endpoint protection platforms. Endpoint detect and response is a little bit different. What happens is there's an activity that might have bypassed that, might have bypassed an attack surface reduction rule, and endpoint detection response has a set of, again, machine learning and AI type algorithms that'll have a look and say, I'm now looking at what's happening here on the endpoint, and the behavior isn't consistent with what should be happening. I know it wasn't blocked, the process is probably legitimate, but what it looks like the process was doing initially was legitimate. But as I look at it now, and I've seen this, and maybe it's something like, I've tried to rename a file, thousands of files at the same time, have a look at what's happening and say, actually, that's an issue. And that's where endpoint detection response is going to kick in. So it can be seen as post-execution, the malware is actually executed. But what we're trying to do here as early as possible, stop an exploit from causing more damage than it should. And then that's either automatically blocked or it's alerted up to the SOC. And you'll see in a second why you're going to need something like a SOC, particularly when you get to the endpoint detection and response piece, because there are lots of incidents and lots of alerts which actually need a human eye to look at. Yeah, there are lots that can be dealt automatically with this with software, but there are lots too that need a human eye to be looked at. And I should have an example or two that later on. Third piece, kind of relatively new. It's always been there, but Microsoft Defender for Endpoint has a new enhanced vulnerability management features. There's an extra add-on to MDE for this. Why is vulnerability management important? As I said at the very start, there's kind of two pieces. Two reasons why endpoints get compromised. One is misconfiguration, and secondly is vulnerabilities. Why? Because it hasn't been patched properly. So vulnerability management solution that is able to go and have a look at your estate, determine what the various vulnerabilities are, help you with remediation is going to be key. So that the ability to discovery across the estate and across all your endpoint types. And so if you have that in place, you'll get to see dashboards a little bit like this. Lots of really useful information. The set of recommendations that will come from the product. Events seen in the last number of days. The type of software that's causing you issues right now. Remediation activities, and where you'll get your highest bang for your buck. Depending on the version of endpoints, you'll see the secure score for devices. This will be with the I suppose the P2 license. But you can see, and then top exposed devices. So we can see over a period of time, or you can see how this can build up over a period of time, how your exposure score can be reduced over time. That's the first reason for vulnerability management. The second reason that we find really useful is in endpoint detection and respond. So if there's been an incident and let's say something's happening on an endpoint, we'll see, can that happen on any other endpoints? Yeah, why? What happened on this endpoint? Well, this particular vulnerability is exposed. So using vulnerability management, we can say, where does that vulnerability exist elsewhere in the organization? Let's go and remediate or patch that straight away, or put in some other remediation activities to do it. So vulnerability management is both. It's a bit like endpoint protection. It's both a protective mechanism to get your house in order, but it also can be used in detect and respond as we do some threat hunting around the place to see what's happening. The next area, which is endpoint detect and respond, this is kind of key. This is with this in place, it gives us the ability to do a whole lot more. We've moved away from that protection to detect and respond. It's more looking at behavioral activity that we'll tend to see. There's a rich set of response activities that we can do, such as either isolating the device or isolating a process, gathering information from the device, etc., etc. So there's a lot that we can do with EDR in place. And there's a set of threat hunting activities that we can do as well, as we look to see something nefarious is happening. And kind of key in all of this is when you look at attacks and as they kind of appear over time, one thing that we tend to see is, attackers might be in an organization for 3 to 6 weeks, and not sometimes a bit less. And over that period of time, they're going through a set of activities to try and do something, either move laterally across the organization, exploit other accounts, prepare some data, stage it before it gets exploited. So what we're trying to do in an endpoint detection response solution is not wait till the very last activities happen, i.e. someone now tries to run a piece of ransomware or malware on all the endpoints. It's to be able to very early in the process detect what's happening. And we've one example of a client where they had a major security outbreak, not quite full ransomware. What happened was they were off the network for about 3 to 4 weeks. All business was disrupted. Post that, they put in an endpoint detection response solution. And then what we're able to do is, as part of an overall managed XDR solution as well, is when we saw a similar kind of activity happening a little bit later, about 6 to 8 months after the first piece of activity, where I would say, actually, this is happening here. This looks like the precursor to an attack. So we looked at some of the events that were happening. We determined that it was. We're able to do some threat hunting around the environment and then block that activity. So what you're trying to do is, that thing, nip it in the bud, get to it before it causes or becomes something that's a whole lot more serious. Lots of capabilities with the EDR feature. One that our analysts tend to use, our incident responders tend to use a good bit, is that live response. So live response is the ability where we can hop onto a machine, say it's been compromised, it's been isolated. We can run some commands on it. We can exfiltrate data off that machine, run it through our digital forensics incident response tools to see what's exactly happening. We have examples of where we've seen pieces of malware on the machine. We weren't quite sure what it was. We pulled it back off. We've reverse engineered it and seen, oh, that's a reverse proxy. Now we know what that's doing. So live response gives us that ability to be able to manage a machine. The machine can do nothing else. We've isolated from the network, but we're able to use live response to get in and operate on it. So that component of the Microsoft stack is kind of really key in as we come to deliver our MDR service. So what's it look like? So we can see here, they pop up into the Defender portal as an incident. So you can see here, there's a multi-stage instance and multiple endpoints. What does that mean? Well, it means that what Defender has done is taken a lot of individual alerts. It's correlated them across, alert type and across the various devices it operates on, and then just gives us one incident to manage. So instead of trying to manage hundreds of alerts, we now have one incident to manage. Yeah, the underlying alerts are there for us to have a look and determine what it is. So here we can see as we click into that, this is kind of one view. What does it show? It shows some detail around the alert. We can build out the attack story and show what that looks like, the timeline of it, the number of alerts that contributed to this incident was over 73. So you can see, looking at those individually would have been very difficult to do. It affects 32 assets. There's there's 20 users and 12 devices. And it gives a summary here and summary of the devices that are there. So from this, we can then pivot into one. We can do some more investigation. Or we can do some response activities as required. So as you can see, that's a very can be very powerful tool. And then the last thing I wanted to show is part of a part of threat hunting. So when we notice something that's happening within the environment, we can say that just doesn't quite look right. Let me just try and do some threat hunting around the place and see, can I see anything else that's happening here? So here's a query, and basically all the events to get logged into a set of kind of column or databases. And here's a query that says, look, can you check in the environment and see anywhere that PowerShell ran and tried to execute a download? Okay, so that mightn't be nefarious. Sometimes PowerShell is allowed to go run and execute downloads. But this particular thing we're doing through threat hunting, we run that using that language KQL. That KQL language is one that's used in Defender. It's also used in Microsoft Central SIEM platform, and now in IBM and their login sites, you use that same language as well. So it's become a very common language for doing this. So as you can see, you go and run that query, the analyst will go and run that query, you'll come back with a list of various devices where that's run, then go and pivot onto those and see, are they all legitimate or some of those ones that we need to look at? So that threat hunting ability within an incident, there's also threat hunting capabilities that we would run outside of an incident that really helps us get a really good view of what's happening within the environment. And the last piece is auto investigation remediation. Like one thing that's key in a lot of the products and very strong here in Defender is the ability to, take a lot of work away from level one analysts. So the ability to have a look at something, determine that it's not a threat, and then close it automatically or do something automatically with it. The key thing with this is called auto investigation remediation in Defender for Endpoint. The key thing about it is it's not very simple. Like if a machine has alert, go and also auto isolate it. I mean, it's how it's used and how we would use it is a lot more kind of complex than that. So really, when talking about security automation, and sometimes people get very head up around security automation and machine learning and artificial intelligence and GPT and large language models to try and figure out what's going on. Really, it's about mimicking what a security analyst does, doing it in a much more efficient way, offloading a lot of work away from them. So as we investigate a threat, it does that. Now, there is some automated remediation, and this can be very, very powerful. Even if you don't have an MDR service, it's going to work behind the scenes 24/7. Now, sometimes we will look at and investigate it, and you may need a SOC to help with some of that as well. So you see, all roads lead to, and that's just a product, and the product on its own is quite good. Our experience with the product, as we've seen a lot of it, is generally hasn't been deployed properly, or isn't being used to its fullest extent. And then the last piece, that in order to get the full maximum value out of it and the full protection for your organization, you need to have not just the product, but you need to have a set of hands and eyes looking at it as well. And that's where our 24/7 SOC comes in. And then our approach looks something like this. So our approach is, we have this kind of three-pronged approach. The first is the technology. So I've already at the very start, talked about why Defender is like an award-winning endpoint protection and an endpoint detect and respond solution. You combine that with our managed security IP and know-how. So the Echo Security team, all based in Ireland, is over about 220 people right now. We've sets of consultants, we've engineers, we've analysts and incident responders, as well as our larger cloud practice with expertise across all various domains from endpoint to cloud, or really, I suppose, from device to cloud. So what we've built up over the years across various different technologies and platforms is a really comprehensive knowledge of how security is, how it should be run, what needs to be done, particularly in this case on endpoints. We built up process libraries. We built our own IP and know-how in doing that. So that's kind of key. The product on its own is great, but this know-how is also key as well. I suppose the biggest part, and I suppose the largest cog in the wheel, is so that the detect and respond piece is done by incident responders and SOC analysts. So we're unique, I think, that we've 24/7 SOC, fully manned and based in Dublin. So we've kept it on Ireland. Yeah, we're managing clients worldwide. One client all the way from I suppose Mexico to China, another one from West Coast US to Japan, with multiple locations throughout. But for local access to security experts, I think it's a key differentiator in what we have. Particularly when it comes to some things like incident response, we need to get into data centers or get on site and get the data back really, really quickly. So I did say I'd run through, and I've seen some of the webinars I've done before. I've had a slide like this that looked at ransomware, and this isn't ransomware. This is just a thing called a turtle attack. Why I've chosen this one to have a look at, and it is a very much simplified version of it. Haven't gone through every tactic and technique, but what I've looked at is this was used actually by the MITRE evaluation recently. So MITRE, as I said, the MITRE organization went and had a look at and evaluated, various different endpoint products. And what I've done is I've taken that evaluation. I've just kind of given a summary of it here for Defender for Endpoint. So it's been an attack that a user clicks on a malicious mail, a URL in a mail, it downloads some content, it gets executed. It does a number of different things across the kill chain, like process discovery all the way to impact. In this case, impact is just setting up more remote access or more access into the environment for later on attacks. So what happens in MITRE is they go through that, they look at all the individual components here, they'll run that against Defender for Endpoint and see how it performs. And the way it works is even if it passes one stage, it'll say, okay, we'll assume it's failed, we'll go on to the next stage. So the very first piece, so someone clicks on that malicious URL. In this case here, Defender had a look at it and said, yeah, I've noticed that in this download, it's a malicious file, it's gone and blocked it. So that's quite powerful. Secondly, I suppose in terms of process execution, so that person either double clicked on this or it was run as part of that download. So again, we can see here that process has been executed, and the threat score is high, and then that's something for the analyst to go and look at. So for example, say this is a new file that hadn't been seen before, the analyst will go and look at this, figure out what it is, and it hasn't been blocked, and then run some tools to have a look at it. This little one here is quite useful, hunt for related events. So has this happened anywhere else in your organization? So very, very quickly, that would hop out to that hunting query we saw a second ago. So it's a very, very powerful kind of hunting ability. So we'll accept it now that it's run. It's in the environment. It's going to try and do a couple of things. So in this case here, it's trying to see what processes are running on the machine. So we can do PS exec or whatever, but there's this NSX installer. It has APIs that allows us to do this. It has a look at this file. So look, this, I'm not quite sure is this good or bad, but this is something that you definitely need to look at. It's doing process discovery. Process discovery is something that, and the MITRE ATT&CK comes as this technique called process discovery. So again, you get alerted to it, and depending on the rules are in place, it's something automatically may happen, or maybe send out to an analyst to go and investigate. But the key point is it's detected. Then look at some other pieces. This one here is quite interesting. So what happened is the user or the piece of software tried to run this command here. So this net group domain bin / domain. Now you can go and run that in your organization right now, and I can guarantee in a lot of organizations, if you go and run that in a command prompt, it's going to give you back a list of domain names in your domain, unless you have Active Directory locked down to a certain extent, and majority of organizations don't, right? So you can run that right now. Is that malicious? No, that's just you running it. But here's the key thing. So that's seen as kind of a low because it's not malicious. But in terms of the timeline and when correlated with everything else, that then becomes something that's suspicious. But again, the key point is it's escalated out to you. You can get to see it. An analyst looking at this straight away is going to say, oh, that doesn't look good. Why is a user in the finance department trying to figure out, run a command to see how the domain bins are? And so that's really key and important that gets detected. I suppose further along into the kill chain, you can see things like as simple as this one. There's another one. Who am I? Again, go to your command prompt, type in who am I. Not necessarily nefarious. But if that's an attacker on the machine trying to figure out, well, I've compromised the machine through a piece of code, now I need to see what the name of the user is. So again, this is a very, very low level alert. As part of everything else, it could be high, but it's, as an event in itself, it's a low level event, someone just typing in something like, who am I? But again, what's key here is that the product has been able to detect it and then escalate it up to engineers. Again, we can build out this timeline of activities here. And in terms of exploration, and this one here is this in-process communication. In-process communication. This is something trying to run a command from one machine across another machine. So see that machine here. I want you to run the script on this machine here. So again, detecting that is kind of key. That would be this tool transfer and lateral movement. So looking at something like that again, kind of key. Another example, file dropped and launched from a remote location. That's a follow-on from the previous file being copied. Okay, so in this case here, was that file was blocked, but again, it gets to show you that this has happened. Malware was, so what had happened is the attacker tried to, through that last command, done some malware on the domain controller. Defender saw it was malware. Saw two things. One was malware and blocked it that way, but also, why is something launching the command from a remote location? Again, something that's key, kind of key that we come across a lot. And then lastly, something like this, we get to see outbound connections. So why would if this was the domain controller, why would the domain controller be making outbound SSS connection from this location? Or something like that. Now this is within a testing environment. That's why that IP address is here. But again, seeing that just doesn't look like it's something that should be happening. Again, raise it up to an analyst for someone to look at. The key in all of this, as you can see, is we're getting lots of really, really good information, lots of good data. But a lot of it doesn't point anything specifically bad, and that's why the you need something like a team of analysts 24/7 having a look at this to say, look, actually that's something that we need to act on, or that's not something that we need to act on. It's a false positive, or it's a benign positive, or something that can just close off. Or maybe I can change some of my rules that automatically that gets closed off in future. And the last piece, this last piece refers to this watering hole piece. How they tested that is they did this. So effectively, it's a script that launches that effectively acts as a packet sniffer on the machine. The only reason I left this one in just show you that the power of the solution is, as you can see here, this is run on a Linux machine. So this shows Defender, across the environment. The last part of this was they launching a script on a Linux machine, so it's not a Windows device. So just showing you that the overall power of the solution, the EDR piece, applies to those various platforms as well. So if you want to have a look at that in further detail, you can see what it looks like. It'll also show some other vendors that partook that MITRE attack, but that's the latest one that's only been published a few weeks ago. There are some historic ones as well that can be looked at. So briefly, what our service is. So very quickly, here's a kind of sheet of the various components that are in it. The only one thing I'll mention here that kind of also differentiates is the incident response service. So the rest of this I've already talked through. The incident response service is one that we've built into the platform. What's to do? There's three aspects to this. The preparation phase, there's a response phase, and the post-incident response. I think key in all of this is a service that's built in. It will deal with the first stage of an attack. It goes beyond the typical detect and respond piece. So if it's a larger incident response that requires much more different resources than what you typically get of MDR, this is where this team comes in, has a set of incident responders and also people that can go out and reach out to the larger organization. And that takes us to a summary. I think Johnny, did you want to kind of hop in and do a summary of some key takeaways, or do you want to follow in from here?
Johnny, you're on mute there.
Thanks, Jack. So yeah, thanks, Paul, for going through the detail there. And look, I think we can see here on front of you, I think the key, if we take 5 key takeaways, one, we start around the solution, right? So it's essential that you have the right solution in place that'll give you the information that you can take action on, right? So we talked there today around EDR and Defender, and specifically around the vulnerability management and how both of them together really are critical to help your organization have the right endpoint security posture, right? Secondly, we talk around detection, right? If we go through what Paul showed there, there's a lot of detail in it, right? So having someone monitoring this 24/7 with the right skill set to be able to understand what's happening and be able to essentially interpret whether they need to investigate further or not, right? He showed some very kind of low-level commands and some highly technical pieces, but it's the skill of the team member that's needed to pull this together. The third thing around it is that it's around configuration, right? So essentially, it's very important to ensure that you have the right configuration in place so that you don't have gaps. And that's just one, the solution, right? But two, also just your standard cyber hygiene. So the right patching on your devices to make sure there's no critical vulnerabilities. That's how an attacker will get a foothold, right? And finally, just to kind of wrap it all up, right? I think, as we said here, we'll be able to detect something, but what we've seen previously, it's essential that you have access to incident response in terms of recovery, right? So you have essentially the right contracts in place with the provider to say that if something goes wrong, that you actually can call upon them rather than having to go and negotiate with them of what's required when something goes wrong. You want to be able to pick up the phone, that phone, as one would say, I need help now, get on the ground, right? And that's essentially critical that you have a service that way. Okay, I think that, Paul, unless you want to add anything there, I think that's the key takeaways that I would kind of cover off.
No, that's great. And this last slide here is just a summary of that service. I think it kind of encapsulates all of what the service is. It also addresses the points that Johnny kind of brought up in the first place. Yeah.
Okay, perfect, guys. So I think we'll just have time now for maybe one or two quick questions. So if you have any questions, get them into the Q&A box now. While I just read out the first one. So I have here, someone's asking, will EDR stop 0-day exploits? So maybe to yourself, Paul.
Yeah, look, that's a great question. So zero-day exploits by their very term are 0-day. They're exploits that haven't been seen before. So typically, what will probably happen is the the ASR rule mightn't have blocked it, or the endpoint next generation endpoint protection mightn't have blocked it. That's key where EDR comes in. So what EDR is, then it'll see the behavior of what's happening. So the process or whatever's happening will probably end up running in the first instance, and then as it does more and more nefarious activities, like it's going to try to do something. At that stage, EDR, the behavioral piece, will pick that up and see what's happening. So will it stop in the first place? No, but an overall EDR solution, particularly with a set of analysts looking at it, help contain it, yes.
Okay, perfect. And another one coming in here. I have Microsoft Defender. How long does it normally take to get it set up with an MDR service? I'm not sure, Johnny or Paul.
Yeah, I can go through that. So we could do it, and it depends on a couple of things, right? The size of the environment, the various different devices that are in it, endpoint devices, what's been done. But the basic configuration, we would have a set of standard configurations that we would use. That basic configuration would just take a number of days. Now, where the delay could be, if you didn't have Defender in your environment already, is the deployment. So whether that's using Intune or other deployment mechanisms, but if it's in place, that setup is less than a number of days. Now, with some things like EDR and in block mode, there's a learning piece, because what we don't want to do is very quickly stop legitimate processes or legitimate actions from running, so we can put it into kind of an audit mode before we put it into block mode. So that may delay it as well. With larger organizations, we'd end up doing something like a pilot and a set of pilot devices before we'd roll it out. So yeah, the answer is it depends, but the other answer is we have a set of kind of pre-canned configurations that will deal with a lot of standard deployments in organizations.
Okay, perfect. I think, unfortunately, I see some more questions coming in, guys, but I think that's all the time we'll have for. So I think, so whoever's controlling, if you wouldn't mind, pop over to yeah, so just one thing to mention, guys. I think I'll put up the results of the poll. So I think, interestingly, what we're seeing here is that a lot of the attendees on the webinar are currently have Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, and what we're seeing also is that very few have a managed EDR solution. So, based on what the guys spoke about, obviously things around, the difficulty finding security experts, and whether or not, the alerts and whether it's configured correctly, or if people are actually managing the alerts of Defender properly. What we are offering is a 2-week free trial of managed Microsoft Defender for Endpoint through Echo. So what will this include? Firstly, obviously, it'll be a review of your current endpoint configuration. The MDR service then will run for the 2 weeks with auto investigation and response. And then finally, what you'll get as well is a technical and a management level report. So if this is something that you're interested in, you can reach out. We'll also be sending a follow-up email with the webinar recording and slides, and also a link then to sign up for the trial. So look, if it's something that you think can be better managed within your business, and you want to take a look at how Echo goes about it, and be sure to sign up. So I think that's pretty much it from us. I think there's one more slide, just with a couple of links on the different aspects of security that we deliver. So look, I'd like to thank firstly the speakers and everyone for attending today. And you'll receive that information tomorrow. So without further ado, I will close out the call. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks a lot.